All right, great. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Great. Well, welcome everyone. I'm really thrilled to be able to introduce our information session today on climate and disaster risk management for organizational leadership. This is a professional learning workshop run through the Columbia Climate School. I'm the Assistant Director of Open Enrollment Programs here at the Climate School. And I'm joined today by Jeff Schlegelmilch, our instructor. He is director of the National Center for Disaster Preparedness and a professor of professional practice here at the Climate School. So the intro session will be 30 minutes long, and I'll cover a few logistics just to start us off. Then I'll hand it over to Jeff to talk about the workshop itself, and we'll have time for some question and answers at the end. So you should be able to see a Q&A box, and you can put your questions in that box as they occur to you. So the climate school is relatively new here at Columbia University, and its mission is to develop and inspire knowledge-based solutions and educate future leaders for just and prosperous societies on a healthy planet. And the professional learning workshops that we run here at the Climate School are opportunities for the Climate School to provide interdisciplinary knowledge for climate leaders across diverse interests, backgrounds, and sectors. And these professional learning programs are really meant for working professionals and adult learners like yourselves, we hope, who will want to develop new skills and explore new topics to further your job-related interests and without the long-term commitment of an academic degree program. So I'll get us started here with a few um, details. So this professional learning workshop, like most that we run, are a total of 15 hours. They're fully virtual, run via Zoom. And this one will be running on Wednesday evenings, Eastern Time, March 25th through May 6th. And they'll be 5:30 p.m. to 7:40 p.m. And they are designed for working professionals and adult learners. And the registration deadline that I'd like to make sure you're aware of here is March 11th. So we do hope that you'll enjoy this information session. And as a special perk to those who are joining us today, soon after the end of the info session, I'll send out a discount code for those who have joined us live today for a bit of a discount on the cost of the workshop. So I'd like to next, tell you a little bit about who our instructor is. As I mentioned before, Professor Jeff Schlegelmilch is the director of the National Center for Disaster Preparedness and associate professor of professional practice of climate. He has currently and in the past worn many hats. Also, he is a former epidemiologist, executive advisor to public and private organizations. He contributes frequently to media outlets, and he's the author of two books, Rethinking Readiness, A Brief Guide to 21st Century Mega Disasters, and Catastrophic Incentives, Why Our Approaches to Disasters Keep Falling Short. So, without further ado, I will hand it over to Jeff. Thank you.
Wonderful. Really great to see everyone here. Thank you so much for joining. I'm just going to share my screen and I'm going to try the over the shoulder. All right. I feel like a news anchor here. This is all, oh, it's opposite. Here. So a couple of things to sort of lead off here. The school, the climate school is fairly new, but we've also, the center, the National Center for Disaster Preparedness has been around for over 20 years now, as well as many of the programs that were embedded within the Earth Institute that became part of the climate school. As it was formed formally as a school, as we saw more and more need for this type of work and this type of engagement and the demand for it. Unfortunately, on the disaster side, we've seen that demand continue to increase. So first I'll look at the United States and then globally, but why the urgency for this? Why do we need this involvement for this? Well, over the last 45 years, we've seen nearly $3.1 trillion in the cost of disasters over 426 events in the United States alone. And unfortunately, that's led to at least 17,000 deaths. And from our understanding of direct deaths versus indirect, this is likely a significant undercount. But if we just look at the last 10 years, roughly half of that has occurred just in the last 10 years. And that's a testament to the acceleration that we're seeing in terms of the impacts of disasters. We've seen nearly half of the events, nearly half of those costs. Fortunately, we've seen sort of a decrease in the number of deaths. We're doing a better job of preventing deaths, but we're not doing a better job in terms of preventing the damage and the number of events. We're seeing that driven partially by impacts of climate change as those accelerate, as well as how we're developing, how we're building. So it means more and more pressure. And I share this just with last year's $1 billion weather events in the United States to show the diversity of the types of disasters that are impacting us. Now, if this were a couple of years ago, maybe 10 years ago, you would primarily see hurricanes, right? And maybe some large wildfires out west and things like that. And now every year we're seeing clusters of different things. A few years ago was a lot of the wildfires in the west. And of course, we know Hurricane Helene, Milton, others. Here we're seeing things, hail is making an appearance, and we're seeing billion-dollar hail events. We're seeing extreme drought and things like that. So we're really seeing a lot of different hazards that are escalating to this billion-dollar event. And of course, this is not unique to the United States. Since 2000, we've seen that number globally in terms of the disaster impacts at $2.29 trillion. And that's not distributed evenly. So this graphic is an interesting one, and there are others as well too, where you see some of the most expensive disasters in terms of direct losses in areas like North America, Western Asia, Eastern Asia, where there's a lot of expensive infrastructure that's being damaged. But if we look at disasters like in Micronesia, it was less than that in terms of the total amount, but nearly half of the GDP of that nation. So we see a lot of smaller nations that may have disasters at a lower total dollar amount, but it's a much bigger proportion of the resources they have that they're available to spend on those disasters. And if we look at what's driving that, this is a cumulative, so everything goes up when it's cumulative, but we see it being driven at least now by tropical cyclones, hurricanes, typhoons, depending on what part of the world you're in. Severe convective storms like tornadoes and flooding are the three biggest drivers. It's worth noting water is often the biggest cause of damage, even in those tropical cyclones and in those severe convective storms, depending on where you're at. And we'll talk about that in the workshop. Other areas you see down below, wildfire, we see increasing winter weather. I mean, we're in New York City right now, so we're ready to talk about that. But also drought. And these are areas that are smaller but persistent and have lasting damage. And so even these ones that are sort of driving these big numbers aren't necessarily the ones that are sort of potentially driving some of the larger economic losses over a longer period of time when we start thinking about things like crop failure and state instability. So all different dynamics. But we're looking at all this in aggregate, and we know that a lot of people are coming from organizations and are coming from businesses. So here's just a sample of the types of impacts that we see. This is from the Small Business Administration in the United States. And looking at in disaster affected areas. So this is looking at the zip codes in the United States of where disasters have been declared, and found that on average, 40% of businesses in these areas are experience losses related to that disaster. That number of those affected is roughly about 40% that actually never reopen as a result of it or fail within the first year. So these numbers are quite large depending on the year in terms of the severe impact. If we look just to the right here to the, let me see if I can do the uh, here. Okay, I can't do it. Sorry, I'm not a newscaster. I guess it's just not in the cards. So if you look at the top right-hand side of this, the share of firms reporting losses from a disaster, you see different firm sizes, and you see it's roughly the same. If you're a $10 million business or a $10,000 business, they're being affected in similar ways as a result of this. Now, how they bounce back and what resources they have can vary widely, but disasters in this case are not sort of picking and choosing larger or smaller. They're all experiencing losses. If we go just down below that to the bottom right-hand side, you'll see that there are a lot of losses related to direct impacts, the loss of assets, the impact to facilities and inventory, but it's much larger when we look at losses to revenue, the ability to continue to conduct business, which may be impacted by physical damage. It may be impacted by damage to supply chains and being able to have products or the raw materials to do the job of your respective industry. And it may also be due to long-term impacts of the economy. You don't have the population to sell to or to come and work. And so this is where we see a lot more of the losses in terms of the losses in revenue in the short term and the long run. And if we look at the types of firms being impacted, we see again that it is a cross section. This is the bottom left hand side of many different industries affected, whether you're in finance or insurance, professional services, manufacturing. Of course, we see some of the highest numbers around leisure and hospitality, most likely being driven by things like coastal storms. We have a lot of hotels and restaurants and vacation areas along coastal areas. So the leisure and hospitality industry is constantly on the front lines of a lot of this. But as you can see, no sector is fully spared. But over the last 20 years plus years that I've been doing this, the business case has always been on reducing losses for this, right? Like the more we can keep functioning, the more we can reduce the amount and the impact from the disaster. Something new has been happening in the last 2 or 3 years, which I think is important to talk about. And it's really reaching kind of a fever pitch right now. And that is investable opportunities. So we're seeing the private sector engage in another way. So this is a report from Tailwind Futures that looks at currently in this moment, the vast majority of spending is coming from public sector funds. It's coming in the US through groups like FEMA and the National Flood Insurance Program, the Community Development Block Grants for housing recovery. Internationally, it's coming from development banks, it's coming from donor nations, it's coming from UN agencies, things like that. The only sort of big bubble here that you see that is private driven are the insurance payouts. And that even includes a portion of sort of publicly subsidized insurance, like in the US, the National Flood Insurance Program, although some of that dynamic has changed, which we'll talk about in the workshop. But what you see with these little dots are funding that's coming from commercial banks, corporations, disaster risk finance, investors. But I bring this up to say that this is all poised to change. There have been a number of reports that have come out lately from JP Morgan, BCG. Here's some data from McKinsey looking at as much as $1 trillion in investable opportunities and technologies in climate adaptation. Now, climate adaptation and disaster resilience, I'm using those terms somewhat interchangeably. They're not completely one-to-one, but when you talk climate adaptation, we're talking about adapting to the extreme events of climate change. We're really talking about climate disasters. And where are we seeing potential investment? Resilient buildings. Buildings are going to get hit harder. We got to get them up to snuff. Grid hardening, right? Energy is one of the key lifelines for disasters. Resilient agriculture is a huge, huge area. Drought, remember I mentioned earlier. Water infrastructure, financial risk transfer mechanisms, flood management. These are all areas. So we're looking at all of the spending to reduce losses, which is also creating new economies in terms of opportunities for new technologies to emerge and investable opportunities within that. So through this workshop, we got to make sense of all this, right? We have to make sense of all this for ourselves as human beings living on this planet, but also for the organizations that we work for, whether it's public sector, private sector, nonprofit, some hybrid of the various ones. And so what we need to be able to do that, we need to be able to analyze these risks, right? There are operational, financial, regulatory requirements. We need to strengthen our organizational planning and capabilities and capacities to conduct this work. We need to really be in a position to evaluate risk using evidence-based, data-driven risk assessment tools that include inclusive, vulnerability-focused recovery strategies that recognize that disasters don't hit communities the same. We have different capacities to cope. Different businesses, different organizations have different opportunities to reach back and bring in resources. We need to construct clear strategies that include risk communication messages and organizational change processes within our organizations to bring people on board in a proactive way rather than in a way that kind of pushes people back or pushes them away. And we need to compare various disaster funding mechanisms and appraise how emerging policy and supply chain shifts influence financial stability. Now, I'm talking about all of this, and I want to come back to this sort of public sector bubble. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about sort of the shifts happening right now in this landscape, where we do see internationally more and more groups stepping up with funding for disaster management. But in the US, we are seeing a lot of changes within FEMA, or at least a lot of projected changes in terms of reimbursement and resources that might be available. And that directly affects public budgets. I do want to say that we do look at this and we are going to talk about this. What does that mean? What are some of the pressures that are leading to this? And how does the political environment affect the availability of these kinds of funds and the prioritization of these funds? It's not our intention to take a side on this. It's how do we navigate the environment as it is, and how do we recognize when things in that environment change? And so all of that comes from the foundation from these objectives of having good data-driven tools that include those that are very measurable, like how high is the water level, as well as the political science. What are driving these? How do we need to frame these value propositions within our organizations and within different environments? So to structure this, as Ashley mentioned, we're looking over the course of 7 weeks, 15 hours total. So essentially, week one, we're going to look at the disaster types, the administrative structures that exist, governance structures for disaster management, and the vulnerability dimensions. We're going to frame the big picture for all of this. Then in week two, we're going to continue down that trend, but we're going to get more into the tactical and the operational with things like the incident command system, principles of business continuity, planning standards and processes. So how do we operationalize all of this big picture stuff from week one? I mentioned all of these investable opportunities in disaster management in the McKinsey report and in many others that are out there. What are these technologies? We got to talk about artificial intelligence. We can't talk about anything without talking about it. We got to talk about early warning systems. We got to talk about communication systems. We got to talk about modeling, all sorts of things that are entering into this, and what are the type of technologies, and how do we leverage them optimally within our organization without sort of handing off all of the human decisions to an algorithm or something like that. Week four, we're going to talk about how do we pay for this. We pay for this through public funds, through private funds, nonprofit, and what are the economic impacts of disasters and how they are affected by things. It's worth noting at a macro level, many times in disasters, we see a noticeable drop in gross domestic product of a country in GDP. And in wealthier countries where there are a lot of resources to pour in, not only is that made up quickly, but at times it even overtakes. It can actually insulate communities because from other financial recessions, because you have all this construction going on, you have all this money that's earmarked to infrastructure and rebuilding, but that's not the case in other settings. But also as an organization, what are your options for identifying funding on the public sector, potential programs on the private side in terms of different types of insurance or other types of programs or savings, and of course nonprofits. And we'll spend a little bit of time talking about investable opportunities as well too, because I think whether you're sort of interested in that side or more on the organizational protection side and risk reduction side, this is going to be a major influence on sort of the disaster economy and the disaster ecosystem. Week five, we got to get into behavioral science and communications, right? How we hear things, how we perceive risk is very, very important in terms of helping to devise communication strategies and helping to support organizational development and the changes to do things that we've learned how to do our whole lives a little bit differently. And how do we engage in those conversations and nurture those processes? Week six, we want to get into the data and really talk about risk management from what are the different tools that are out there for assessing risk. We'll go through some publicly available tools that we can use to assess risk. We'll talk a little bit about sort of privately available tools. There are a lot of ones you can pay for and essentially buy into. We're not going to specifically endorse or dissect any of those, but we'll talk about some of the dynamics. A good colleague of mine was once asked a great question, which I think is an important thing we'll talk about, which is how do we evaluate these products that are out there for our own risk management? What are the types of questions we should ask? So we'll look at what's free, what's publicly available, and then in the downscaling, what are signs of a tool that is doing this in a very responsible way, and what are some red flags, some things that might be a little bit disconnected from the data, might be overly modeled. And then in week 7, we're going to talk about those programs for how do we develop a training, exercise, evaluation program and improvement planning, and even run through the process of designing an exercise and participating in a little bit of an exercise, just to end with a little bit of what we would call in FEMA a proficiency demonstration. That's not what we would call it. We'd call it a pro-dem, because anything that was 2 words you can hyphenate into a new made up word. So pro-dem is what we would always call them. And so just a reminder, with this, it's 15 hours. It's on Wednesday evenings. And it's going to be from 5:30 to 7:40 Eastern time. We will record it. We know people are coming from work and things like that, so try to accommodate all that. Registration deadline is on March 11th. And with that, I want to make sure and just have some time to be able to answer any questions that folks may have. So I'd invite you to go ahead and use that Q&A function. And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here. So yeah, so we can see you all. Any questions we can answer for folks in the time that we have?
Yeah,
Ah,
thank you so much, Jeff. So I have someone asking about sharing the slides.
yeah, and I think we're going to have the recording available. Yeah, so I'm happy to share the slides if folks want some of the references and things too. Ashley, if that's technically possible, but also we'll have the recording available for folks who are on here, so you can also go back and pause it as well too. But yeah, it's as long as we have a mechanism for this, I'm more than happy to share those slides with the citations where I pulled stuff.
Oh, great. Our next question, how much background knowledge should we have on disaster risk management prior to the workshop series?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nia. So I think it's one where we're really trying to build this around for folks who have a variety of different levels of experience with all of this. I think it's perfectly okay if you come into this and this is a new world for you, because we're going to spend some time really in that first session to sort of go through the overview, key terms and things like that. And for folks who are coming in with maybe a bit more experience, we're going to make sure and kind of sprinkle in some activities, some discussion, and some other elements to this as well too. So yeah, I would say that extensive experience is not required for this. And if you do come in with a lot of experience, I think what we're really looking is to kind of pull in that first session with a lot of the basics into this. But we'll also lean on you, because I will say too, each and every one of you, regardless of your level of experience in disaster management, are an expert in your organization. You're an expert in your community. And so we really do take a discussion and activity oriented approach to give the opportunity to share that perspective and share that expertise. And if you have expertise in key areas like business continuity, bring it. I'm happy to talk on as long as they'll allow me, but it's much better if we're sharing with each other our expertise. Great.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ash.
Oh, just reading the questions out loud for those who can't see them. Thanks for the wonderful presentation. Would you share any financial assistance or scholarships you are aware of for this workshop series? Yes, we do have some discounts for those who first attend this info session. I'll share that later. That's a 10% discount. We also have discounts for those who work in the nonprofit sector or for government, those who have attended past professional learning workshops with us, and then also current students and alumni as well. So please feel free to reach out to me directly about those scholarship and discount rates, and I can share more information on those with you. We do have, in all the emails that you receive from us, you have seen the exec ed at Columbia dot I'm sorry, at climate.columbia.edu, and I will share that again in the chat for you.
Yeah, and I'll put up the screen here too, so you can see
Thank you.
this. I'll leave
You're
it
getting the
there.
hang of that, like pointing at the right part of the slide. You could be
I
a
know, I know.
weather
Hey,
forecaster yet.
I'm just doing this till I make it big in weather anchor. I don't know where I was going with that. Okay.
And then just with our last 2 minutes, as other questions, please put other questions in the Q&A box, but I will also launch a quick poll just to understand what your goals would be for participating in this workshop so that that can be used to inform the tailoring of the workshop to make sure we're making this as useful as possible for you. So feel free to, hopefully you'll see that you've seen the poll pop up and you can just select as many of these topics of or these goals of interest to you as you'd like. All right. Any other questions as well? Let's see. I'm just thinking if there's any last little logistical items. One thing that I can mention, which I didn't say before, is that those who attend the workshop will get a certificate of participation from the climate school. This isn't a degree program and there's no academic credit, but it is at the level of academic rigor of our academic programs, so you can have that benefit. This is also open enrollment, so there's no application. It's really is meant to be open to all who are interested to join.
One other piece I would add as folks continue with the poll is we do work to bring in speakers with other specific areas of expertise in the deep dives of some of these topics. So as much as I would love to fill all 15 hours with my speaking, I know that it's in the best interest, one, that we provide you a lot of space to in terms of activities and discussions, but also that there are some experts who can deep dive in areas of communication and some of the science behind that, the climate risk modeling and some of that, as well as experts in the field. And so, yeah, so we will of course bring in some experts in very specific areas to do a deeper dive along the course of it as well. All right, this is great. I see folks are able to do the polling pretty well.
Right. I'll share results real quickly just as we end here. We have the most interest here in professional growth. Almost everyone has that as one of their goals. We have over 50% interested in strategic communication, informed advocacy, and following that, we have 43% interested in systemic impact, strategic leadership, and operational readiness. So thank you for those answers.
Yes. The correct answer was other to get me out of something else I have to do Wednesday nights. But no, thank you for that. This is really helpful to understand because, again, as Ashley mentioned, we'll use this to, and again, continue to engage with discussions to really help ensure that you're getting the key things out of this that you're looking for. And this is great. Um, yeah, I know we're 1 minute past. Last call for any questions, any additional questions, I should say. Oh, we got one.
Member of a nonprofit, but not an employee. Let's follow up by email on that. I'd love to be able to make this work for you at all, if at all possible. But let's discuss the details of your
Yeah,
situation by email. So
great.
thank you, Ariana. All right. Well, if that's it,
Yeah,
thank you so much to everyone who joined us today. And we do hope that this has been a useful experience and a little bit of a taste of what's to come with the workshop. And we would really love for you to join us for the full workshop. And thanks to Jeff for giving us the snapshot of what's to come.
wonderful. Wonderful to see everyone here. And yeah, really looking forward to having you in the workshop. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for all that you're doing. And thank you for your interest in this.